You want to know what the end of an empire looks like? It's not bombs falling on cities. It's not a dramatic collapse broadcasted live on CNN with Wolf Blitzer looking concerned. It's not even a war you can point to on a map. It's phone calls. Quiet ones. Between allies who used to call Washington first but don't anymore. And right now, those calls are happening. Every single day. Between capitals that spent 80 years looking to America for leadership. Only now they're not asking for guidance. They're coordinating an exit. Let me show you what I mean. While the President of the United States was standing in front of cameras telling the world that Canada only exists because America allows it, that Canadians should be grateful for the privilege of existing next to American greatness, Sweden's largest pension fund was liquidating $8 billion in American assets. Not slowly. Not over the next few quarters as part of a diversification strategy. They ripped the money out like they were fleeing a building that was already on fire. $8 billion. Gone. In days. Denmark's central bank dumped $100 million in US Treasury bonds. These are supposed to be the safest assets on Earth, the financial bedrock of the global economy. And a NATO ally, a country whose soldiers bled out in the same Afghan sand as American Marines, decided they'd rather hold almost anything else. And when America's Treasury Secretary was asked about it, you know what he said? He called Denmark, this tiny country that lost soldiers fighting alongside Americans, that honored every NATO commitment for 70 years, irrelevant. Denmark kept selling. Here's the part that should make you sick to your stomach. This isn't countries throwing a tantrum. This isn't some emotional reaction that'll blow over in a news cycle. This is countries making a cold, calculated decision. And the decision is, you are no longer worth the risk. Let me back up and show you the trigger. Because none of this happened in a vacuum. 3 days before the money started moving, before Sweden made that call, before Denmark started dumping bonds, before any of this, President Trump went on camera to defend his threats to reduce NATO funding. And in that defense, he said something that detonated like a bomb across every allied capital in Europe. He said America's allies in Afghanistan, the British, the Canadians, the Germans, the Danes, quote, stayed a little back, a little off the front lines. He said Americans did the real fighting, while the Allies watched from a safe distance. Let that sink in for a second. 457 British soldiers died in that war. Not in some rear support role. In Helmand province. In Kandahar. In the exact same kill zones where American Marines were bleeding into the sand. They died in ambushes. They died to IEDs. They died in firefights that lasted hours in temperatures that would melt your resolve. 158 Canadians. Dead. Fighting alongside Americans in some of the most dangerous territory on Earth. 59 Germans. Dead. And Denmark. This tiny country with a population smaller than Houston. Per capita, they suffered heavier combat losses than almost any coalition member. They didn't send peacekeepers. They sent combat troops into Helmand, one of the deadliest places on the planet, and they paid for it with their sons and daughters. These countries answered Article 5. You know what Article 5 is? It's the promise at the heart of NATO. An attack on one is an attack on all. It's the reason American soldiers weren't fighting alone after September 11th. It's the promise that brought every single ally into Afghanistan within weeks of the towers falling. And these countries honored that promise with blood. Not tweets. Not sternly worded letters. Not thoughts and prayers and flags at half-mast. Blood. The blood of their children. And the President of the United States just told their families it didn't count. That their sacrifice was somehow less. That they stayed back while Americans did the hard part. Britain's Prime Minister called the remarks frankly appalling and insulting. Germany's Defense Minister went on national television primetime, the whole country watching, and demanded a public apology. But here's the thing nobody's saying out loud. The thing that matters more than the anger. The real damage wasn't emotional. It was strategic. European leaders made a calculation that night. A cold, clear-eyed calculation that will shape the next 50 years of global politics. And the calculation was this. If this president won't honor their sacrifice from 20 years ago, if he'll spit on the graves of their soldiers to score political points at a rally, he sure as hell won't defend their borders tomorrow. The NATO promise stopped being believable. Not officially. NATO didn't collapse. There was no dramatic announcement. No treaty torn up on camera. But something worse happened. The leaders of Europe looked at the man who controls America's nuclear umbrella, the man who would have to make the call if Russian tanks rolled into Estonia, and they thought he would let us burn. And once an alliance stops being believable, the money follows the logic. So where did the money go? Let me show you. January 27th. While Washington was sleeping, and I mean that literally, it was the middle of the night in D.C., the European Commission and India signed the largest bilateral trade deal in modern history. 2 billion people. 96% of tariffs eliminated. The most comprehensive economic partnership agreement ever negotiated between two major powers. And not a single American company was invited to the table. Not consulted. Not informed. Not given a heads up. Nothing. America found out the same way you did from a press release. You want specifics? Fine. Let me walk you through exactly what American companies just lost. German cars. Last week, German automakers faced a 110% tariff trying to enter the Indian market. A Mercedes that costs $50,000 to build would cost over $100,000 by the time it hit an Indian showroom. Market effectively closed. Under this new deal, 10%. Volkswagen, Mercedes, BMW, the exact same companies getting crushed by Trump's tariffs in America, the same companies that are cutting jobs and closing plants because they can't compete just got handed the keys to the fastest growing car market on earth. India has 1.4 billion people, a middle class larger than the entire American population. And every single one of them who wants a German car just got a massive price cut. 1. Indian tariff was 150%. French winemakers couldn't even compete. Now, eliminated. A bottle of Bordeaux that would have cost $300 now costs what it should. Machinery, 44% tariff. Gone. Chemicals, pharmaceuticals, industrial equipment. Gone, gone, gone. In return, India gets 99% tariff-free access to the entire European market. Indian textiles flowing into Paris boutiques. Indian leather in Italian design houses. Indian jewelry in every shopping district from Berlin to Barcelona without a single cent of tax. Now here's the timing that should make your stomach turn. This deal was signed the exact same week that Trump imposed new tariffs of 25 to 40% on Indian goods. So let me make sure you understand what just happened. American companies selling in India now pay 25% or more just to get in the door. Their European competitors? Zero. Same products. Same quality. Same market. But the American company starts a quarter of their margin in the hole before they sell a single unit. Who wins that fight? You're sitting there right now, scrolling through this on a phone that costs more than it did last year, wondering why everything seems to be getting more expensive. Why your grocery bill keeps climbing. Why that car you wanted is suddenly out of reach. Why your paycheck buys less every single month. This is why. You're being priced out of the global economy while your government brags about winning. Let me make this so real you can taste it. A French farmer, just some guy in Provence with a wheat field, can sell his grain to 1.45 billion Indian consumers completely tax-free. No tariffs. No barriers. Straight to market. An American farmer in Kansas, growing identical wheat, same quality, same grain, probably better farming techniques, faces a 25% tariff wall. Who does the Indian buyer choose? This isn't a riddle. This isn't some complex economic theory you need a PhD to understand. This is math. Simple, brutal, unforgiving math. The French wheat is 25% cheaper. The French farmer wins. The American farmer loses that sale. And the next one. And the one after that. This is called trade diversion. And it's the silent killer of economic superpowers. You don't collapse in a dramatic moment. There's no single catastrophe you can point to. No Pearl Harbor. No 9/11. Nothing that makes the news in a way that demands a response. You lose one contract at a time. One buyer switches suppliers. One shelf in one store in one city stocks German goods instead of American. One company decides it's cheaper to manufacture in Europe than deal with American tariff chaos. One job disappears in Ohio while a new one opens in Stuttgart. Slowly, quietly, permanently. And here's the thing about permanent. It means it doesn't come back. That buyer who switched to French wheat, he's got a relationship with that French farmer now. He's not switching back because some American politician changes his mind in 2 years. The infrastructure is gone. The relationship is gone. The trust is gone. Slowly, quietly, permanently. But the buried headline is worse. Way, way worse. Everyone's focused on the trade numbers, the tariffs, the economic impact. And yeah, all that matters. But there's a detail in this EU-India agreement that nobody is covering, that I haven't seen a single major outlet pick up on. This deal includes mutual recognition of professional credentials. Let me explain what that means, because it's going to shape the next century. An Indian engineer certified under this agreement can work in Germany tomorrow. Not in 5 years after jumping through immigration hoops. Not after getting a separate German certification. Tomorrow. Their degree counts. Their experience counts. They can land in Munich and start working immediately. A European doctor can practice medicine in India next month. An architect, a software developer, a data scientist, any skilled professional covered by this agreement can move freely between these markets like the borders don't exist. You know what built Silicon Valley? You know what turned a bunch of fruit orchards into the most valuable real estate on Earth? Talent. Specifically, the world's best and brightest choosing to come to America. Indian engineers, Chinese scientists, European researchers. They all came here because America was where you went if you wanted to build the future. That talent pipeline is being redirected. Europe just made it easier for India's brightest minds to choose Munich over Mountain View, to choose Berlin over Boston, to choose anywhere but America. We're not just losing trade. We're not just losing contracts and sales and market share. We're losing the people who build the future. But wait, it gets worse. The EU-India agreement includes an entire chapter, not a clause, not a paragraph, an entire chapter on defense and security cooperation, joint maritime operations in the Indo-Pacific, coordinated naval exercises in the waters where American carriers have patrolled alone for decades, cybersecurity frameworks, shared protocols for defending against the same kinds of attacks that take down power grids and steal elections, intelligence sharing agreements, the kind of arrangements that used to be reserved for America's closest allies, the kind of information you only share with countries you trust with your life. Read that again. Let it sink in. These are conversations Europe used to have with Washington. Only with Washington. These were the discussions that happened in secure rooms with American officials present, American interests represented, American approval required. Now they're having them with New Delhi. Without us. America's closest allies, countries we defended for 80 years, countries whose soldiers died alongside ours, just signed a defense agreement with the world's largest democracy. A country of 1.4 billion people. A rising superpower that will shape the next century. And Washington found out from a goddamn press release. They didn't ask permission. They didn't seek approval. They didn't even offer the courtesy of a heads up. Let me say this as clearly as I can. That isn't a trade deal. That is a strategic realignment of the entire Western order. The architecture that won the Cold War, the American-led alliance structure that kept the peace for 80 years, is being rebuilt. And you're not in the room. You're not even invited to the meeting. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, something equally seismic was happening. Canada's Prime Minister flew to Beijing. Not Paris. Not London. Not any of America's allies. Beijing, the capital of America's chief strategic rival. And he signed an economic cooperation roadmap with China. He did it while Washington was asleep. Literally. Middle of the night. While the president was sleeping off another rally, Canada was building a new relationship with a country America has spent a decade trying to contain. Then the Prime Minister came home, stood in Parliament, the Canadian equivalent of a State of the Union address, and said something remarkable. He said it in French. On purpose. So Americans wouldn't understand it. So it would slip under the radar of the English language press. Quote, "There's almost nothing normal in the United States right now, and that is the truth." The Prime Minister of Canada, America's closest ally, our largest trading partner, the country that shares the longest undefended border on Earth with us, stood in his own parliament and said America is no longer normal. Then he dropped the number. 12 new trade deals. 4 continents. 6 months. Not proposed. Not in negotiation. Not we're exploring options. Done. Signed. Sealed. Canada isn't protesting. Canada isn't waiting for the next election. Canada isn't hoping things get better or that some new administration will restore sanity. Canada is replacing you. They're building a new economic architecture, new supply chains, new partnerships, new relationships with countries that will buy what Canada sells and sell what Canada needs. A complete reorientation of their economy away from dependence on a neighbor they no longer trust. And they're not alone. Mark Carney stood at Davos. You know Davos, where all the world's most powerful people gather every year to talk about the future. 10 days after visiting Beijing, 10 days after shaking hands with Chinese leaders and talking about what comes next, he addressed the global elite. And he said, middle powers must act together. Because if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. He got a standing ovation from the leaders of Germany, France, Japan, South Korea, Australia, every country that Trump is threatening with tariffs, every country that's watching America tear up 80 years of alliance building. They stood and applauded a Canadian telling them to build a future without America. Then Carney sat down across from America's Treasury Secretary, the same man who called Denmark irrelevant, and rolled his eyes. On camera, at Davos, with the world watching. When reporters asked if he meant it, Carney didn't hesitate. Quote, I meant what I said. Then he revealed the number again. 12 deals. 4 continents. 6 months. Let me tell you what this means for you. Not for geopolitics. Not for the global order. For you. Your wallet. Your kitchen table. Your kid's future. For 80 years, every major trade route ran through American influence. Every shipping lane, every supply chain, every flow of goods and money and ideas, it all connected to America. We were the hub, the sender, the essential nation. Every alliance was anchored by American commitment. Our promises meant something. When America said, we defend you, countries believed it. They built their whole security strategies around that belief. Every deal that mattered required an American signature. Nothing major happened in the global economy without us at the table, without our interests represented, without our companies getting a piece. That architecture is cracking. Right now. In real time. The insults shattered trust. When you tell allies that their dead soldiers don't count, that their sacrifice was somehow insufficient, that they stayed back, trust evaporates. And trust is the only thing holding any alliance together. The tariffs built walls. Not physical walls. Walls in the market. Barriers that make American goods more expensive, that make American companies less competitive, that tell the world we'd rather fight than trade. And this single week, Europe and India built a highway around those walls. They didn't ask permission. They didn't wait for America to come to its senses. They didn't hope that things would get better. They made a decision. And the decision was, we're done waiting. Sweden pulled $8 billion. Gone. Denmark sold its bonds. The treasury bonds that are supposed to be the safest investment on earth. Denmark looked at them and said, no thanks. France activated the EU's anti-coercion instrument. That's the legal mechanism that authorizes coordinated economic retaliation against any country that weaponizes trade against Europe. They turned it on. It's pointed at us. India opened its markets to Europe and closed them to America. Same products, same needs. But European companies get in free, while American companies pay a 25% toll. Canada's Prime Minister signed deals with Beijing, while the President was still tweeting about how grateful Canadians should be. And here you are. You're standing in a grocery store, staring at eggs that cost $7 a dozen. You remember when they were $2. You remember when you didn't have to think about it. You're watching your 401k wobble. Not crash, not yet, but wobble. Jump around. Make you nervous every time you check it. You're wondering why everything costs more. Why your paycheck doesn't stretch as far. Why you can't afford the things your parents took for granted. This is why. You're living through the moment when the world decided to build a future without you in it. And the question that will define the next decade, the question your kids will ask you about, the question historians will write books about, isn't whether America can rebuild these relationships. It's whether anyone will want us back. After we've proven on camera, repeatedly, proudly, with no shame and no apology that we can't be trusted. That will insult the dead. That will call allies irrelevant. That will tear up agreements and impose tariffs and demand gratitude for the privilege of being bullied. Will anyone want us back? The allies are making their calls right now. To each other. Not to Washington. They're building new structures, new partnerships, new ways of doing business that don't require American approval. They're not doing it out of spite. They're doing it because they have to. Because depending on a country that might abandon you, might insult you, might treat your sacrifices as worthless, that's not a strategy. That's a suicide pact. They're protecting themselves from us. You're not watching a trade war. You're watching the moment the world decided to build a future without you in it. And unless something changes, unless there's some dramatic shift in how America treats its allies, how America approaches the global economy, how America understands its place in a world it no longer dominates by default, this is the future. Not American decline. American irrelevance. Which is worse? A declining power still matters. People still pay attention. You can still reverse the slide. An irrelevant power is just ignored. They don't fight you. They don't argue with you. They just go around you. Build without you. Trade without you. Make decisions about the future of the planet without asking what you think. That's what's happening. Right now. While you're reading this, we'll be tracking the US response. Probably more tariffs, because when you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and tariffs are the only tool this administration seems to have. Probably more speeches about winning. More claims that America is stronger than ever. More insistence that the allies will come crawling back, that they need us more than we need them, that this is all just negotiating leverage. The allies aren't crawling. They're walking away, calmly, deliberately, permanently. Subscribe? Seriously. Because what comes next is going to cost you money. It's going to affect your groceries, your gas, your job, your retirement. It's going to shape the country your kids inherit. And you should at least understand why.